Ladies and gentlemen of Rockhammer, a warm welcome to the drummer and founder and legend of Motorhead, Mr. Lucas Fox.
Hey, nice to see you. Stevie. Excellent. Really, really pleased to be here on Rockhammer. Welcome, gals and guys. Really nice to. Well, I can't see you, but you can see me, so that's a start.
That's cool. I've got the right T-shirt on as well. Never seen without it.
Absolutely. I got the. Well, I hope you wash it occasionally.
And the tat as well.
Absolutely. The ink. We like the ink. Done a nice job there.
There's one slight change actually. The iron cross is actually missing from the bottom, and it was replaced. I had to be a little bit PC, so it's replaced with an ace of spades instead, just to be right on.
Well, I can understand that. I mean, that was one of Lemmy's additions when Joe Patagno produced the first version of Snaggletooth, and I was sitting on the sofa with Joe Patagno between me and Lemmy in Doug Smith's, the manager's office, and he brought out a big brown envelope with two versions of what he thought would be a good logo, and Lemmy's finger came out and just went, that one. But I want it much dirtier. I want it much more raunchy. And so he added the spikes on top of the head, and he added the iron cross hanging from the tusk. And he also added the dripping, like Alien, that saliva dripping.
Yeah, I'll do that. So, but it's more of an age thing these days. Can I ask you, because I was going to do a Wikipedia fact check. Always helps if I get my teeth in, doesn't it? Did you really pick Lemmy up from the airport in '75 when he was fired from Hawk?
Yep. Yes, absolutely. In May '75.
Wow, fantastic. And
but we've been hanging out for a long time before that. Whenever he wasn't on tour, because he was on tour a fuck of a lot in '74. And recording and stuff, but every time he wasn't, we were hanging out because we had so much in common. We met at the Speakeasy through Motorcycle Irene, who introduced us, and from that moment on, we were pretty much hanging out regularly because we just had so much in common. Although we had 6 years difference between our ages, it was uncanny because well. I think the first conversation we probably started talking about, humor was the first one, where he told me a Tommy Cooper joke in typical Lemmy style. Just like that. And the second thing we got stuck into was talking about British R&B, and we went through them, and we went through all sorts of bands, the Byrds, obviously, and Leaving Here, and stuff like that. And we started talking about that, and it's really mystified me because he was obviously in the space rock band at the time, Hawkwind, and it surprised me that we had the same tastes in this British R&B movement, which was years before. And so we really got started talking about that. Once we'd sort of, aligned that bit, we then started talking about Second World War, and he surprised me and I surprised him that both of us were very learned, I'd say, on the Second World War. That it'd been one of my obsessions since about the age of 12 or something, because my mother was on a base that sent all the SOE agents out to France, and she was the commander of the base in 1943. On the women's side, but it wasn't looking after the admin, which I thought for years and years until a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, I saw her on a film on Tempsford, which was the base, and I saw her from the back, unmistakably my mum, and she was putting all the missions on the board, and so therefore she was actually operational, and I visited Tempsford. Last year, for a couple of years ago, and spent some time on the base. Very interesting stuff. So I was completely into that, and also being at a French lycée, which makes a lot of people go, well, how the fuck did you get into Motorhead, coming with that education and all that stuff?
Yeah.
And of course, that's also a story at some point worth recounting. I'm writing my book at the moment, so
I was going to ask about that. How's that going, actually?
it's going really well. It's kind of scary and weird and stuff, because I've never really looked over my shoulder into my past before, and it was only, well, after Lemmy's death, that suddenly everyone realised that there was another guy at the beginning of Motorhead. And
certainly
so,
not forgotten for my generation, because you know, I'm well aware that it was Larry Wallace, Lucas Fox, and Lemmy, the original.
well, the order's different, but yeah.
Okay.
The order was the other way around, where it was, you know, it was literally me and Lem,
Yeah.
or Lem and I, and that all started, as I say, in '74, and so when he finally got kicked out of Hawkwind, he was an absolute train wreck, and I picked him up from the airport. And then we spent, I think, about 2.5 weeks together, where he didn't really want to see anybody. He was so pissed off. He was so angry.
As you would be. As you would be.
As one would be, as I certainly was at the other end. But yeah, and so I don't know. It's that strange thing that. So many men are educated into being in constant competition with each other, and I didn't have that thing, you know, because of the way I was educated, and the women that brought me up, and the girlfriends, because I had a lot of girlfriends who were older than me, and they really taught me how to make love and all that stuff. So there were a lot of things in common, including our respect for women and love of horses, because he rode horses, I rode horses. So
didn't know that, really?
Yeah, when he was a kid, he used to love to go to the local stables, and he started putting girls at the local stables and stuff. And but he loved horses, same as I did. We loved to ride horses. We never actually rode together, which is a shame, because that would have been fun.
Yeah,
but.
Yeah. I'm surprised he didn't saddle up for the cover of Ace of Spades. Actually, that would have been a bit.
Well, exactly, and I think that probably happened, like a lot of things with Motorhead, as a kind of well thought out last minute thought. So, but what they should have done, it's probably because Filthy and Eddie didn't ride horses, so you know, I can imagine that they both, you know, sat on that idea if it ever happened.
I'm sure they both rode a lot of things, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
just not with four legs.
Absolutely.
So the idea behind our show is this is the second annual Motorhead Mayhem, and it's last year it went absolutely viral. We got it shared by Motorhead Worldwide, which is cool. And what I want to do is put this interview up. I shall put this up on the web soon, and I wondered if you would be able to talk about a couple of tracks that we're going to be playing. Namely, we're going to be playing Lost Johnny, and wondered if you wanted to do an intro to that when we play it on the show.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one, because this album, have you actually got this album, or shall I get it sent up to you?
Oh, that would be wonderful if you could. Yeah.
I will. I'll just make a note of that. 1 second. Because what I'll do is I'll dedicate it to you or to the station or whatever you want me to do.
Thank you.
But what's interesting about it is when Warner Brothers got hold of me, because they were writing the liner notes, and so I sort of said, okay, well, you know, send me the remastered version of the album, and I listened to it and I thought, that's very interesting, because I hadn't heard it for, you know, 30 years or 35 years, something long time, and I started listening to it, and I recognized on most of the tracks I could hear the clune of my snare drum. That's Larry's term for clune, because my snare drum, I didn't dampen it off completely to make a complete crack. And I had this clune sound, which was like a bit of a ring to it, which Dave Edmonds, the producer, actually loved, because it meant that he could use that, because this sound would cut through the rest of the sound, and he didn't have to have the snare drum that loud, making the bass and the guitar much more powerful sounding.
Sure.
So I started listening to all the tracks on the new remastered, expanded version, and realised that my Clune was in there. And of course, I thought about it. I thought about the way it was recorded. Rockfield at the time didn't have a drum booth. Okay, this is the clue, and therefore what was recorded was also recorded with overhead mics all the way down the studio to get big sound. So the original drum kit is actually on all the tracks I played on. So there's 2 drummers on the original tracks that I played on. There's me and there's Filthy, apart from on Lost Johnny, where Filthy wasn't available, or no, where they said that they liked the version as it was.
Sure.
So, but we can come to that if you like towards the end of this, where we can talk about Rockfield sessions and all that.
Okay.
But it is part of what is interesting about this. You wanted to introduce Lost Johnny, so here is Lost Johnny, one of my favourite tracks of all time, and I still love that the guitar sound that Dave Edmunds got, and also those wonderful octave licks that Larry did, which I just think that they still stick in my mind as something incredible, as something really a real hook,
sure.
You know, as they say, a real hook. And so Lost Johnny, the original version.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. And the other one, which almost never gets airplay, but I love ripping the rule book up on Rockhammer. I mean, I've played 12-minute tracks and things that just, one reason it's successful is because I tend to play the tracks that aren't the go-to tracks, you know, not like most rock radio stations. We're actually pitched above that. We play heavier than them, and we play the non-go-to tracks. So I'm going to hit you with this one. We're going to be playing Vibrator.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's another good track, which is an interesting one. But yeah, so here is Vibrator.
I mean, actually, the bit that does worry me slightly is it's I'm a vibrator, greased and ready to go, which is very 70s rock and roll, isn't it? You know, greased, really? I mean, now it would be hypoallergenic lubricant.
Well, yes, because motors are now run by computers, whereas at the time it was all grease and
grease was the only thing available then.
It was good enough for them.
So whenabouts is your book coming out then? Because I'm intrigued and I'm so looking forward to reading it.
It'll be coming out it'll be coming out next year, I think, because I'm writing the French version first, which I was educated in French from 4 to 17, so it's a natural language, and I've been living in France for 30 years or so.
That was my next question, actually. So, yeah.
Next
question: how long have you been living in France?
Well, there you are. You got the answer already. So yes, the English version will be coming out in 2022 as well, because I've got to rewrite it in English, because I refuse to have somebody translate for me either way into French or into English, which of course means I've shot myself in the foot, because instead of writing one book, I've got to write 2, and it's the same subject. But it's not for the faint-hearted. Anybody who's faint-hearted, don't buy the book. It will
warts and all, is it? I hope so.
Oh, completely warts and all, and it'll be totally subjective, which may displease people, but fuck them, I don't care. When I started thinking of writing the book, I thought, well, all the books I've read, and that's a lot, you know, including White Line Fever, which is a great book, good read, and all the rest of it, and Keith Richards' life, and all, you know, lots and lots of biographies, but they always sound like it's a journalist talking about what it is. I've rarely read books that actually go into what it felt like to be living it and to be doing it in that state, and the sort of drugs we were taking and the sort of life we were living. And, you know, frankly, most books talk about the rock and roll, and the rock and roll they talk about is like, oh, I put 5 strings on my guitar instead of 6, and I did open tuning, which is all very good if you're a musician and find that interesting. But in the end, I don't find that very interesting, because, you know, okay, all right, we've got that, you know, we can understand that. But what I really want to know when I'm reading a book about somebody, anybody, is what it felt like to be that that person. You know, the smell of the squats, the dealers, the cockroaches on the wall, the sticky carpet in the pub, you know, what people were talking to each other about, you know, what the kids were wearing. And I mean kids, you know, the youngsters, you know, of sort of, you know, 4 to 8 year olds who were basically copies of their parents, you know, with these wonderful little flared jeans and stuff. All that stuff is what I think. Well, it's what I have to write anyway.
Yeah.
You know, it's the way I'm writing it. I couldn't write it like a journalist would write it because I'm not a journalist. But what everybody's told me is that they love the idea of just plunging back into the 1970s, and particularly what Ladbroke Grove and Notting Hill Gate and Portobello Road felt like, living in it, living inside this. I mean, Ladbroke Grove for me was a character in itself in the book, in the same way as Hammersmith Odeon, where I started going to the Hammersmith Odeon. I must have been 11 for the Beatles Christmas show, and it's called Another Beatles Christmas Show. And here is my ticket. There it is.
Oh, wow. How amazing. That must have been like your local, was it? It was
my local. I was living in Chiswick at the time.
Okay.
And there are also, so we went to the Hammersmith Odeon a lot, including things like this, which also changed my life.
Chuck Berry show, my goodness, man.
Chuck Berry show at Hammersmith Odeon, you see. So that's when I started going to Hammersmith Odeon, and saw shitloads of bands there, and the Stax, the Motown show as well. Just amazing shows with lots of bands on them. And so when it finally came around to playing Hammersmith Odeon, support to Blue Oyster Cult, there were these flashbacks which I had as we came down from the dressing room, remembering and seeing the stage beneath me, remembering all the other people I'd seen on that stage. And it was finally, I've got to walk on this stage.
What a moment for you. What an incredible moment. And obviously...
But likewise, the Roundhouse, where I went a lot, and likewise the Marquee.
Yeah.
You know, all these mythical places, which I ended up also playing with Motorhead or with other bands, you know, the Warsaw Pact, playing the Red Cow, or you know, Oxford Uni and stuff like that. So it's an interesting one, plunging back into all of this, my past, because I've never really done that. I've always been heading forwards and always thinking about, well, what's next?
Yeah, and I find it interesting that you're quite open to, you know, discussion about the way you did obviously crash out of Motorhead in the same sort of way that Lemmy did from Hawkwind, and it's kind of refreshing that you don't mind touching on that, you know. I guess you're going to do that in the book as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what can I say? One of my attitudes to that is that much as I loved Lemmy, because he was really like a big brother, big uncle to me at 22, you know, it's a big difference. And I've been going to Speakeasy for 4 years then, because I lied about my age to get my membership card and managed to get it. And that's how I started learning about this other world, which of course, you know, the rock gentry was living in. And I had to learn about this to start breaking through in my own way. Because I wanted to be a drummer since the age of 9, where I started washing cars to buy drum kits in the street at the age of 9. And so it was a natural progression through all of that. So crashing out of Motorhead, the amphetamines, I'm sorry to say, amphetamines don't really suit most people. When you start taking them to that extent, the number of people who actually survive that are not that many. And, you know, I buried maybe 15 friends in the 70s of various overdoses on various drugs. And there is a thing about this. I mean, Lemmy in 74, 75 was almost on a mission, almost a vocation to get people to take amphetamines, because as far as he was concerned, sleeping was a waste of time. And he wanted everybody to be on in his own world. He was also extremely frustrated by Hawkwind, who were obviously smoking dope all the time and taking acid all the time, which he did for a long time in Hawkwind, but he got bored with it. And he started really wanting to, you know, to live a different life. So he was living in a different time zone to what Hawkwind was. So that also drove him to want to you know, his favorite drug, which of course came also from Pervitin, of the German army on Pervitin, which was their speed, which meant that they could do the Blitzkrieg, which meant they invaded Europe much, much faster than any other army had ever done in the history of mankind. And Pervitin, therefore, after the war, was what most of Germany was hooked on, because they started with the pilots in the Spanish Civil War, where the German Air Force were bombing in Spain. And then they used it on therefore the crack troops, all the elite divisions, both tanks, aircraft, and Waffen SS units, using this drug Pervitin. After the war, and the submarines as well, the U-boats, to keep them going so that they could do very, very long hours. Britain did the same thing with Benzedrine for their pilots. So it wasn't unique to Germany. But after the war, therefore, Germany was hooked on Pervitin. And when you talk about the Beatles playing the Star Club Hamburg, they were playing to a whole bunch of people who were also still on Pervitin, because it was still rife in those days. Then you can take it all the way back into Britain with you know, all the early 60s bands, The Who. Keith Moon was dealing speed to The Who. So it's
the Priest.
You can understand Lemmy's addiction better,
Yeah,
because it was part of what was done, and it was part of, if you like, the myth of you know, just constantly keeping going.
I'm guessing he was obviously he was the exception, not the norm on speed, by the sounds of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, Lemmy was one of the only people I knew who became normal on speed. And when he wasn't on speed, he slept.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was every, you know, 3 or 4 days. So I lived that life with Lemmy for the time we were together, and obviously particularly for the from the month of May when he came back and I picked him up, all the way through to December when I spun out the other end.
Yeah, yeah. So are you working on, apart from the book, is there any other projects you're working on at the moment? I know you've had a really, really busy life working with various musicians over the years.
Oh, yeah, and various musicians and various other things. I mean, running shows. I ran shows for MEDEM, which is the biggest music convention in the world. I ran their shows for 3 years, live TV, 50 to 15 countries, live TV with live bands. That was great. That was very exciting. Then I ran shows in New York for French bands, exporting French bands, because I got pissed off with everyone saying, oh, there's no good music coming out of France. And I just knew different. It reminded me of sitting at the age of 10 or 11 in my parents' house in Chiswick, in the dining room on my drum kit, banging away. And this American couple came to dinner with my parents, and the man of the couple kind of leant against the doorway in a suave way and said, oh, you're a really fine drummer, August, but you can forget it. You know, you limeys will never be able to swing like the Americans do. We're in 62 or 63, just before the British invasion of America happened, with the Beatles, the Stones, the Who, etc., the Kinks, etc. You know, all the wonderful bands we know. And of course, that just stuck in my gullet. I was thinking, you fucking arrogant bastard. This is not going to... And of course, you know, I was proven right.
Yeah, yeah.
Likewise, everybody always said, oh, Johnny Halliday. Well, yes, Johnny Halliday is a poor copy. That was France's Cliff Richard. You know, I'm sorry, but Cliff Richard had one good track. Probably I'm the only one or something. But you know,
there is a
the
reason
Rockhammer
Cliff has been blown up. I have a cheesy act that gets blown up at the start of every Rockhammer show, and he's been there on more than one occasion. I think
Right.
he gets through 2 bars of Living Doll before the dynamite goes off. Just a wacky one.
Well, it's not like The Devil in Disguise, is it? Which was one of the first tracks that turned me on. You know,
Yeah.
you look like an angel. I mean, come on, that's not Cliff. You know,
No.
I got wise. You're the devil in disguise. Yeah, yes, you are. You know, and that's a track. That's a fucking track. You know.
Such an engaging chat. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Stevie. It really is. And to you, all you gals and guys out there, you know, keep rocking, keep the faith, and stay safe. You know, you've only got one life. You know, try and keep your hearing, because I managed to keep mine. If I can, you can.